Welcome to my podcast. Why didn't anyone tell me this? With my guests, we are discussing health issues and debunking some of the many myths around our health. And in this series on Beyond the Bleed, exploring menstrual health, it's a pleasure to talk to Sheree Hargreaves, who went through menopause age 15. Sheree is a campaigner to improve awareness of primary ovarian insufficiency, or POI for short. At just 15 years old, she was diagnosed with POI, which is a condition that drastically altered the course of her life. Now at 24, Sherry is using her story to raise awareness about this often misunderstood condition and to support others who may feel isolated by their diagnosis. Sherry is an early menopause educator, research and engagement lead, and menopause ambassador, and she often appears in the press to talk about POI and is very active on social media with her Instagram account, Life of POI. Welcome, Sherry.
Hi, hi Joyce, how are you?
I'm great, Sherry, thank you. And I always start by asking my guests to share their story. So over to you, Sherry.
So it's quite hard to condense the last nearly 10 years into a few sentences, but I'll give it my best go. So I was around 12, 13, and a lot of my friends had started getting their periods and started talking about buying their first bras. It was a big topic of conversation amongst my age group around that time, either if they were scared or if they were excited about it, this newfound womanhood that people felt. And I could never really get involved in the conversations and always felt a little bit left out. And that's because I hadn't started my period yet and I had no breast development, things like that. So I didn't feel like I could be a part of the puberty talks with my peers. So I approached my mum and a few times asking, is it normal that I haven't started my period yet? Like, when am I going to start my periods? Because I guess that's the first port of call when you're that young. And she said, well, I was a bit late, so maybe you'll be a bit late. And so I just left it for a little while, and it kind of became an annual thing from around 12, 13, being like, right, okay, maybe next year I'll get it, maybe the year after I'll get my period. But in the meantime, as I didn't want to feel left out, I carried around pads and tampons and really tried to fit in and tell people that I might have synced up with them and all of this sort of like lingo that people would say. And I read so much about periods because I was so curious about it. So yeah, so at 14, I first went to the doctors because I said, I just don't think this is right. Like, every single one of my friends has got it and I don't. I'm so confusing. And they said, it can come late with some people. Didn't run any tests or anything like that. They just said, just wait a little bit. So that's what I did. I waited again, and meanwhile, in the back of my head, I'm just thinking, something's definitely not right here. I just can feel it. And so again, I said, the next birthday came round, and I said to mum, I kind of want to go again to the doctors. Nothing's changed. I no breast development still, and haven't started my period yet, and I just really want to know what's going on. So we went again, and at first there was a little bit of pushback, saying, it could still happen late. Like, your mum has said that she started her periods late. Um, so we thought, oh, maybe we shouldn't leave. But thank God I've got a bit of a feisty mum, and she said, I just want to do some blood tests, like just to see if anything's fine with her hormones. And to be honest, that was the first. I was like, "Oh, blood test, bit scared." But yeah, got in to do my blood tests, and pretty much straight away I was referred to Manchester in the paediatrics for gynecology, and a few months later I was told that I was infertile and going through something called primary ovarian insufficiency, which, first of all, I had no idea what infertile really meant, and I didn't know what primary ovarian insufficiency meant. At the time, it was called primary ovarian failure. That's what they diagnosed me with. So I was like kind of stuck in this very cold room, and very shocked and thinking infertile doesn't sound good, and failure, that definitely doesn't sound good. And I was just completely in shock. And my mum, bless her, was crying. Obviously, she knew what infertility was and all of this stuff. And I kind of tuned out after that. They said that I was needing to be on medication for the rest of my life. And yeah, my world kind of turned upside down from then. And over years and years, I'm 24 now, so 9 years later, nearly 10 years being diagnosed. And yeah, it's been a real journey, but I'm sure we'll get into that with some of the questions going on. But yeah, it's been hard.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing your story. I've actually teared up. It's so difficult to hear you explain what you've been through at such a young age. I cannot imagine how this was for you at age 15, and that you and your mum had to fight to get the right diagnosis. But a common theme that we hear for women of all ages when they've got a women's health issue.
Yeah, it was hard. I left with a green slip in one hand with a list of medications that I was a bit confused around, and a leaflet in the other hand that said the word menopause on it. And it had two white old ladies on the front of the leaflet, and I couldn't see myself in that. Like, I was like, what the heck is menopause? Like, what is going on? I have no idea. So I, thought I'll push this to the back of my mind, because the doctors have also said that I don't need to think about this until I want babies, and that was definitely not on my radar at the time. And so I thought I'll just take whatever the doctor says, and just get on with life and try and push it to the back of my mind. But I went into school that very same day and sat in science lesson, which was my favourite lesson. And we were going through GCSE questions because it was coming up to taking my exam. And we were shooting out answers and questions for 1 markers because they're the easiest to get. Those are the, questions that if you don't get, it's silly, and just gotta get those ones. One of the questions was, what is an organism? No, sorry. What is a species? And the answer was an organism that can reproduce. And I sat there in the classroom, having just been in the hospital in the morning, and they said that I obviously couldn't do that. And I didn't think, I was like, well, I'm not really a woman. And then I went to science, I'm not really a species. Like, am I an alien? Like, what? Like, what am I? I felt completely alienated, completely alone. And I was just so unbelievably lost, really.
That sounds so tough, Sherry. I cannot imagine. It seems that the doctor did not really explain too much to you, just talking about infertility and not really explaining things. So tell us a bit more about the drugs that you were given when you first had your diagnosis, because you've been on these drugs since the diagnosis. So tell us a bit more about what you're taking.
Yeah. So I went on to a small dose of estrogen, and I slowly built my estrogen up in increments. Like, I was chopping pills in half. They offered me patches, but I didn't want to be on patches because it was visible on my body, and I was a bit worried about people knowing my condition or asking what it was or whatever. So I opted for pills, and I also felt a little bit more normal because a few girls in my class were on the pill, on the contraceptive pills. Yeah, I took the pills, and I just like built it up. And when I was 17, I had my first withdrawal bleed, which me and mum has celebrated and kind of had like a period party. And as you can tell from this, me and my mum are super close. But yeah, we kind of celebrated, and it was it felt surreal. Yeah, it kind of brought me into this like, oh my god, like, that's how it feels and all of the emotions. But it obviously was a withdrawal bleed, which I learned like later on. It wasn't an actual period like a ovulation and a cycle and things like that. I was then put on the actual combined pill after I had a withdrawal bleed, and I um, was 21 days and then progesterone or something like that. And that was like back to back. But we figured out that in the weeks that I was on progesterone, I wasn't on estrogen. But 12 weeks of the year, I wasn't having any estrogen. So then we started to talk about the patch and how that can maybe help. And by that time, I'd kind of felt a little bit more comfortable talking about it with the doctors, and I'd researched a lot about it. If I'm honest, I kind of threw myself into education. I wanted to distract myself, and then in COVID, a positive thing that actually happened from COVID, if you can take any, is that it stopped my education stopped. I was in the first year of uni. All exams were cancelled, and I was like, you couldn't socialise with friends like everyone else. And I then had to really deal with what my condition was, what it meant for me, how I felt in my body, and how I connected back to myself. And in doing that, I researched so much about the condition, and I just thought, you know what? I found out that 1 in 10,000 women go through the same thing as me under 20. And I just thought, I've got to find these women. I've got to build this community. I've got to see if anyone feels like I feel. And so that's when I started my Instagram. But that was the first time I'd ever told anyone, even my siblings.
That is so much for someone your age to take on board, and you were not even 20 yet. Can you tell us more about how common POI is?
So like research currently says that it's 1 in 100 under 40. However, I kind of disagree with that because a lot of um, symptoms or something like that can be covered up from the contraceptive pill. Women go years and years with being on the contraceptive pill and then stop taking it to potentially conceive and then run into troubles that could be, POI or PCOS or endometriosis, anything like that. So I think it does happen to more than that. Also, there's a lot of shame around fertility, a lot of shame around, bleeding periods. There's shame around women's breasts and vaginas and all of that sort of stuff. So I also think a lot of people don't go to the doctors, aren't included in research. Is that really intersectional or like, different ethnic backgrounds included in that? I think it is definitely way bigger than 1 in 100 women under 40. It is classed as a rare condition, but I do think it is more common.
Sherry, what do we currently know about the causes of POI? And are there genetic risk or other factors that can lead to someone getting POI?
So, actually, 90% of women, their condition is idiopathic, which means that there is no, an unknown cause. It doesn't mean that there's no cause. It just means that they don't know yet because there's not as much research, things like that, not as much funding that goes into research and things like that. But the causes that are known, I think it's around 20% of women actually um, have like an autoimmune condition that makes them go through um, primary ovarian insufficiency. Also, cancer treatments such as like radiotherapy, chemotherapy that can damage the ovaries, and you can also layers of reproductive health. So it could be self maybe PCOS or endometriosis that maybe led to surgical menopause, the removal of the ovaries. There's lots of different things like trauma. Yeah, there's a lot of different causes, but 90% are unknown currently, and genetic, obviously, and family history and things like that. If your mum went through early menopause, you might go through early menopause, that sort of thing as well.
And do you know why you got POI?
So I unfortunately sit within the 90%. So I don't have any autoimmune conditions. I fortunately didn't go through cancer treatment or surgical menopause. But it's still it still is a sting to not know why. It's still hard because I think for many years, because there was nothing external to blame, like another condition or something like something like that wasn't in my control, even though I know rationally that it's not in my control, um, I kind of blame myself, like why me? What did I do anything? Like, have I missed something? Like, has something happened, or have I don't know. I was driving myself kind of insane. Like, is there any food I ate or like anything that like I did? And I definitely know my mum blamed herself as well, and she was, very like, oh, could we have gone in sooner? If I hadn't have said, you know, just wait a bit, I was late. We could have maybe frozen some eggs, but the doctors did say that the condition of my ovaries personally was that I wouldn't have been able, even if I came in at 12, there would have been nothing to retrieve from my ovaries. So that gave a bit of peace of mind, kind of, in a weird way. But yeah, I think yeah, there's a sadness in not knowing.
And Sheree, how do the drugs that you take help your symptoms?
Yeah, so with estrogen and progesterone, and like there is a role for testosterone, there's obviously still so many studies going on about that. It's not, no one really has decided, but I feel like we're always playing catch up with women's health research. But yeah, so with estrogen, we have estrogen receptors all over our body, and it's kind of like a woman's battery. It keeps us going, like our skin, nails, hair, eyesight, mouth, teeth, heart, brain, everything. It's in everything. So if we don't have it, you don't only experience symptoms, even though some people don't. Again, very individualized. But you can experience symptoms like the classic menopausal symptoms like hot flushes, night sweats, insomnia, joint pain, difficulty concentrating, bad mental health like anxiety, depression. I mean, the list goes on and on. It's kind of sad, but it does go on and on. But taking estrogen can alleviate those symptoms, and also progesterone looks after the lining of your uterus. It can basically keep it juicy and healthy. And then the long term side effects or impacts that not having estrogen in your body can be things like dementia, osteoporosis, heart disease, diabetes, lots of different things like that. Obviously, infertility is massive, and like even eczema has a link, and like dry skin and like eyesight, and lots of different things. Gum disease, lots of different things. But taking estrogen definitely helps alleviate those sorts of things. I also want to say on this podcast that this is a super heavy topic, and obviously there's some really hard hitting facts, like dementia is super scary and osteoporosis is terrifying, and so is infertility. But it's like one of my main messages is that it's not all bad. You can do things that will help you, like exercise is super important, looking after your gut health is super important, things like that as well. Also, reducing stress and just normal day-to-day things and having fun, that helps. But it's not all bad. Like, I'm 24, I've been going through this for nearly 10 years, like I've said, Like I've got an undergrad degree, I've got a postgrad degree, I've got a full-time job, I live with my partner, I live with my best friends, I live in London, self-sufficient, like all of these things. And I do live with a condition, but that's not me. The condition isn't me. So I know I've done a whole spiel there, but yeah, I hope I answered that question.
Yes, that's fine, Sherry. How long do you think you'll be on hormones for? Do you think you'll come off them at some point or will you stay on them forever?
They have mentioned that. I think when I was diagnosed, they said that I'd take it until I was around like 50, 51, 52, that sort of age, which is like the average age of menopause. But women who are around that age start to take it, and I feel like um, I kind of feel like there's so many differing opinions around that. Honestly, there's lots of different things like about replenishing hormones, but I know for a fact that it's super, super important for women with POI, especially when they are super young and they've never had periods or things like that, especially when they're teenagers in their 20s. It is super, super important to replenish the hormones that your body's not producing. It's just like if you were, you know, anemic, you would eat more spinach and you might take supplements. It's just because your body doesn't produce it doesn't mean that you should just leave it and not have any. And for example, like diabetics, obviously that's very extreme, but if they didn't have insulin, it would be catastrophic. So it is super important, and how amazing is science that we've actually been able to provide people with these things. But yeah, so I think my personal opinion is that I would probably be on it forever, but I think it is 100% personal as well. I mean, everyone has autonomy over their bodies as well, so a lot of people don't take it at all. They're really super scared of taking it, but I do urge everyone, especially POI women. Menopause is different, but definitely women with POI, 100%. I'm an advocate for HRT.
So, Sherry, you're on the pill, which is lower doses than HRT that we give women when they're in the perimenopause and menopause. So, can you tell us why you're on lower doses?
So at the start I was told when I was diagnosed at 15 that there was different ways that I could replenish my hormones, and they did show me the patch, but they didn't explain that the patch and the pill were kind of different, in absorption, like the patch can absorb better, things like that. They didn't explain that sort of thing, and they didn't explain the effectiveness of them both. They just basically said that you want to feel normal, then maybe the pill's a good idea because a lot of people your age are on the contraceptive pill. So I kind of thought, well, I want to be normal. Let's do the pill. It wasn't until I actually did my own research in like lockdown and I just dug through loads of research papers, had a look online, did all the classic googling, and found that the patches were working for a lot of other women, a lot of other personal experiences, but it is completely individual. A lot of women, you've got autonomy over your body. You can choose whatever works for you. I know some women who are still on the combined pill and they say that their hormone levels are actually a good and healthy normal range on their blood tests and all of that sort of stuff. But I actually don't think that I was absorbing very well with the pill. My hormone levels were really still quite low, and my FSH levels were actually still quite high. But the FSH levels are the follicle stimuli hormone, and this is kind of your brain telling your reproductive system to work, to try and stimulate the ovaries to release an egg, basically. And when I was originally diagnosed, my FSH levels were, I've actually written it down, 2,
Wow.
and they're meant to be between 1 and 11, I think. I think that's right. And so obviously mine was super sky high and my estrogen levels were super low. I didn't actually write that down, but they were definitely under, I think they were about 30. I mean, they were really low. But the estrogen levels that they look for are around 250, 300, that sort of thing, I think. But I was way below that. And even when I was on the contraceptive pill, my levels still weren't really rising. They were rising, but they weren't at the normal range. So I opted for the patch. The patch is also super good because it absorbs through the skin. You are less likely for things like blood clots, less of a risk, and also it's kind of easier than remembering a pill every day. You just have to change it twice a week in my regime. So I kind of just having a reminder set on my phone of when to do that, um, or just 2 days in a week and stick to those days and things like that. It's a bit easier than forgetting maybe one day of taking the pill, especially when you're young and you don't really have a routine. You know, you're going out to see friends or you don't really have like get up to go to work and all of that sort of stuff. I mean, now it's more routine, but yeah, so I opted for the patch. I think that was a really good idea, yeah.
So now it sounds like you've got your treatment pretty much under control. Do you have any other symptoms?
So it's also really hard, I want to say, for women who have POI that went through it as a teenager, because the things that you would think are classic menopause symptoms are similar to those of a sweaty teenager that's moody and maybe spotty and maybe have eczema and maybe can't sleep because they're wired off sugar, but in reality they can't sleep because it's insomnia. You know, these things that you just put it down to going through puberty, just a teenager, just moody. But in reality, my situation was different. But also with women who go through menopause at the average age, they have had years of cycles where they understand their body, they know that maybe they are moody in certain times in their cycle, maybe they are sweaty in other times of their cycle, whatever it is, they have had years of stability, and then they come to a kind of like smashing against a wall and like, oh my god, everything's gone up in flames. Don't know what's going on for some people anyway. And everything's changed, and obviously that's why it's like the change because everything's changed from being so stable. Whereas women with POI in your teenage years anyway, it's really weird getting used to your cycle. Maybe you're not regular. Like it's very common to not have a regular cycle yet. It's your body, figuring itself out. And so, like missing your periods or not having a period for a while might just feel a bit normal, and all of the other symptoms I mentioned might just feel normal. So I basically haven't had a normal. So I don't really know exactly what symptoms I have and what I don't. However, I can say that when I haven't had HRT and gone from having it for a long time and then having had about 3 months to 4 months off because I couldn't get it because of the shortages, I definitely knew what symptoms were.
Yeah.
It came flooding back. I was not definitely not wearing jumpers and sitting inside with the heating on. No, I was getting really hot, really flustered. I was definitely experiencing like what I felt to feel like living in a grandma's body, clicky and achy and all of that sort of stuff. So I definitely experienced that. I also experienced vaginal atrophy. And this is the thinning and drying of the vulva and vagina walls. And I never linked this with my POI. I always thought that it was a separate issue and I never brought it up in doctor's appointments or anything like that because I never really thought anything different. I knew that I experienced pain, not even in sex, like I wasn't sexually active, but I knew that I was having pain down there when I was like having a wee or wearing jeans, sitting down for a really long time, like definitely in those long 3 hour English exams at school where you have to sit in the hall for 3 hours. That was testing. But yeah, so there was a lot of vaginal symptoms, but also you get taught that that's your private parts. Like, you don't really talk about your private parts because they're private. That's your thing to think about. It's very private. So I never really brought that up, which is weird because I was talking about periods so openly, but I never really talked about the actual anatomy of myself. So I only came to actually seeking treatment when I was 20 for that. And that's because I read up about it and found the link. And I was like, oh my God, it's linked. Like this thing that I've been experiencing this whole time is linked to my POI. Like I had no idea. Oh, there's a buzzing going on. So yeah, I went to the doctors. I asked like about this. I told them the research that I'd found. I showed them some guidelines because I always think it's really important to go with the knowledge and then get the care instead of going and trying to find the knowledge when you're there because sometimes it's really hard for doctors and GPs to narrow that down themselves, or they see so many people a day, the waiting list is so long, you've probably got a 10-minute slot that you don't really have time to get to a solution. So I always try and like absorb as much knowledge as I can and then go in and then say, right, this is what I want, this is what I kind of need. I've looked at this, not in a patronizing way, but in a way that I'm like, I kind of just really need this, please. So yeah, so I walked away with localized estrogen, which comes in different forms as well. You can get like a ring that you put like up in your vagina, sits like on top, like where like the cervix area is, and you just like remove that. I can't remember how long it is now, but I need to brush up on my vagina estrogen knowledge. But also you can get pessaries, so you just top them up and then release the tablet. But I did find that at the beginning of the journey with vaginal estrogen, pessaries wasn't amazing because I was dry in there, so it wasn't dissolving. So it was like coming out basically. So there's also creams that you can have for your vulva, for inside. There's also moisturizer. There's natural moisturizers as well on the market, and you can get it prescribed as well from your GP if you are in the UK. So yes, there's a lot of different options, but it's super, super important because I know a lot of women struggle with this and don't say anything.
Yeah, thank you. That's really important information. How was your GP been? We're recording this on the day that the report came out, the government report that women's health is basically underdiagnosed and things like endometriosis and other things are really underdiagnosed, and they've been calling out the health professionals, which I think is a bit unfair because they just need more education. How have you found your support from the health professionals?
Yeah, I kind of second you on that. It's really hard reading these like big titles like neglected from GPs and all of it because it's not just a sort of witch hunt out for these professionals, but it's also a deterrent to people going to the doctors. Like
Yeah.
they just think I won't get the care anyway, so I may as well not go. It's the waiting list, it's the underfunding, it's systematic. It's not a person to person issue. Yes, there are people who disregard. Yes, there are people who say, "Oh, the pain's not real," and all of this sort of stuff. Yes, these people do exist, um, but it's a massive systematic issue. There's not enough funding. There's not enough research. as I said earlier, 90% of women with this condition, the cause is completely unknown, and that's not because there's no cause, it's because there's no research. There's we literally only just starting research on HRT under 30 years old. That is flabbergasting to me because I'm taking medication for 10 years now that has no research, literally zilch. No research whatsoever. It's only just starting out now, longitudinal research. We're only basing treatment from younger people on those who are older, who also have some sort of ovarian function still going in menopause. It's not always just like it's kaput, there's nothing there. There's something still active there sometimes. So it is very frustrating. It is hard to persevere. It's exhausting being an advocate and being a researcher and fighting the good fight for people, because sometimes you don't feel heard. Sometimes you think there's no funding for this research paper. No one wants to publish this one, or no one wants to, you know, listen and all of this. But it's the most important thing is community. The most important thing is talking about it, raising awareness, and finding actionable steps to take forward. Sign petitions, voting. We're all a voter, you know. There's so many actions we can take. I don't think there's a need to finger point people. Even though I have been on the end, to answer your question, I have been on the end of very negative consultations, very negative experiences where I've felt traumatized coming out of doctor's appointments because they've been very neglecting in language choice, in asking me more questions than me asking them. A lot of people say, "What's POI? What's that again?" Or, "Can you just?" I'm 24 years old. They say, "Oh, can you just tell me it from the beginning?" And it's like that's 10 years ago. Or, we can't find your notes now. Can you just give me a quick summary? I can't give you a quick summary. We've got 10 minutes. So that's why you have to equip yourself with the tools that when you do get that 10 minutes, because not everyone can afford going private, not everyone can, get private healthcare and all of that sort of stuff. But when you do get that 10-minute opportunity, don't sit and think, okay, I'm just gonna go off again and explain it and blah blah blah. You say no. It starts before the appointment. You educate yourself. You come up with a list of questions. You go in with notes. You print off guidelines. You write down everything you want from the appointment, and you don't leave the room until you got it. And that's
Yeah, I totally agree, and this is why I work on women's health education. That's what you've summed it up brilliantly. No matter what your situation, if you think you've got endometriosis or PNDD or anything, your advice is perfect. We do need to educate ourselves and go into that GP's appointment with and almost tell them this is what I've probably got and I need this done,
yeah,
that done, this treatment, whatever. And the fact that your mum, when you were 15, went in and said, I want her to have tests. And then they did the
yeah,
tests and then they made the diagnosis. So that's brilliant advice, Sherry. That's what we have to do as women. We have to do the research
yeah,
because it's going to take years for the health professionals to really be educated about women's health, which is a
yeah.
disgrace, but it's not their fault.
It's
It's the
horrid,
system's
yeah,
fault.
yeah,
Yeah. I
exactly.
mentioned,
I mean, it goes way back. So yeah, it's not just a now issue. If you think, if you think I've been forgotten in research, try black women, try women of different ethnicity. It's it's try trans people, people in the LGBTQ plus community, people who are disabled. If white women think that they're disadvantaged, think about all the other women.
yeah.
So we, instead of pointing fingers, instead of doing that, we need to all come together We need to uplift each other's voices, not speak for people, not, say, "Oh, I need to speak for this person," blah, blah, blah. No, lift up someone else, give someone else that platform. We are all in this together, not to sound cringe or anything. We are all in this together. And instead of, trying to just fight a wall, we all can do this together. It's sad and it's disappointing and it's scary and confusing, and people don't have access to the internet. People don't have access to things like this to educate themselves. So talk to someone, talk to a friend. You learn and spread that knowledge. Like, we all need to be in this together, and it sucks that we have to do that, and I wish that we didn't have to do that, but it is super important to do that.
Such wise words, Sherry. And you said at the beginning that one thing you've done to really help that is you looked for other women who were experiencing what you were during when you had the COVID lockdown. So tell us more about your work and what you've been trying to do with Life of Pi, POI.
So with Life of POI, it genuinely did start as a space where I could A, find someone else who's going through something that I'm going through, and B, kind of be like a journal where I just put out all my experience, tell people about what I'm going through, and hope that someone can either learn from that, can sympathize with that, or have that experience themselves. So yeah, that's the reason why I started. However, I started to look into it more, and as I've said, I've definitely done my research, and I actually studied at UCL to do my masters, which was gender, society and representation, and I fell in love with intersectionality and equity and equality and inclusion and all of that sort of stuff, and gender issues, feminism, and I really sunk my teeth into that. And I thought, how can I use all of these tools? Because I didn't just learn facts, I learned how to think in a different way. And how do I use this knowledge and these tools to genuinely help other people? It doesn't matter about money or followers or anything like that. The messages that I receive on a daily basis to say my daughter's going through that, or I'm going through that, or you've helped me get my diagnosis, you've helped me get the right treatment, or I'm not a doctor, I'm not a professional, but coming from lived experience is so valuable. So yeah, in my work, that's basically what I do. I just use my story to facilitate conversation, to open up people's minds, and to spread the word, basically, to be weird, but yeah, to just bring more awareness and tell people that it's such an important thing to research. Like, if I can't research it, someone else research it. If I can't
Yeah.
share it, someone else share it. Like, we're all in this together. Yeah, and I really like that your work as well, Joyce, is that it's not about clout. It's not about, it's about the nitty gritty, doing the research, you know, telling people what they need to hear. And yeah, I just think you're great.
I think you're great too. What I think's amazing at this time, which even wouldn't have been there 10 years ago for you, is that these topics are now on the table. We are talking about
Yeah,
periods, about menopause, about women's health issues. So now is such a good time to talk more and do. I mean, you said it several times and you're so right. We need to do the research.
yeah,
Ridiculously under researched, so we can't give women good advice about so much of this because we've just not done the studies. On that note, are there any advancements or new treatments that you know that are, or anything anyone's doing that might help POI?
Yeah. Yeah, so right now in the POI space, we have, I mean, they're always updating the guidelines. So my favorite guidelines are, I can't pronounce it, but begins with ESHRE. Is that how you spell it?
So,
Guidelines.
yeah, so
Yeah, sorry.
I
What were
work.
they?
That's
What?
ESHRE. It's yeah. It's the European
Yeah,
Society of Human Reproduction and Embryology. So my
there we
international
go.
reproductive health education collaboration is part of that, and I've worked with ESHRE for about 30 years. I was on their executive committee about 25 years ago. So they've been a big
Yeah,
part of my life. So they're brilliant at writing the guidelines. So I'll put the
really good.
link to the POI guidelines. So what they do is gather all the experts, especially around Europe, but globally, to help write these
Yeah.
guidelines. So I'm glad that's one that you recommend. That's brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah, seriously, and because it's not only good research, it is digestible, it is
Great.
accessible. Like when you read it, you can understand it. I know that I've obviously got degrees, but I've given it to people and they've said the same thing. So yeah, it's really good. But a study at the moment, a POI study, a longitudinal study that is currently undergoing. There's over 100 participants, which sounds like not many, but it is paving the way. And it's basically putting women on different HRT regimes and trying to find the best recommended treatment for women with POI. This is the POISE study, so it's POI. They're doing great work. They're collaborating with universities and hospitals, and I know a few women who are actually in the study. So yeah, it is. That will be the first longitudinal study of treatment for POI, which sounds crazy because it's 2024, but it is it is great that this is now happening. But again, it's longitudinal, which means it goes on for a long period of time. So results won't be out for a long time. So it is tragically a waiting game. Research doesn't happen overnight, but it's definitely going in the right direction. I'm excited about it.
That's great news. I wanted to ask you something quite personal. But I have heard you talk about this before. So they told you when you were 15 that you were infertile, but I believe that
Yeah,
they have checked your womb, etc. So it would still be possible for you to have children in the future if you wanted to, and with a donor egg. So could you
yeah.
just explain what that means for you?
Yeah, so it would probably be a tricky process, like it is with anyone really going through IVF. And if you haven't watched the film Joy as well, absolutely
Yeah.
amazing on Netflix. It just, for me, the community of all the Orvam Club stood out because that's what I'm trying to create is these amazing women who want to push forward science. However, um, so for me, when I first was diagnosed, I had a very small womb and there was just no follicles left in the ovaries. And like my AMH was super low and all of this stuff. So when I was diagnosed, they said that they could try and get my uterus to be a healthy size, healthy shape, but it's a slow process because they don't want to like pump me with estrogen and it just go all oblong and weird. But over the years, they have been able to keep my womb healthy. Um, so which is a massive, amazing achievement, and so hopefully one day, if that is something that I choose to do, IVF would be an option for me. I am with a woman as well. Infertility in the LGBTQ plus space is a huge thing, and there's also not much research into that. Also, a lot of limitations when it comes to LGBTQ plus couples, when it comes to children, and so there's a long way to go with all of that. But Um, atomically, biologically, my womb is healthy enough to carry an embryo from a donor egg.
Excuse
So
me.
it wouldn't be, it's alright, it wouldn't be my egg. It potentially could be my partner's egg, but it could also be a donor egg.
Oh, that's good news about your womb. They've
Yeah,
done some good work there.
yeah,
Excellent. Now,
exactly.
yeah. And now I've called the podcast "Why Didn't Anyone Tell Me This?" So I just wondered, with the women that you've met that have been on the same similar journey to you with POI, was there something they said? Why didn't I know this before? Have you thought about that? What did you not know before that you wished you had?
I definitely didn't know what menopause was, and I definitely didn't know you could go through it when you weren't quote unquote old. I definitely didn't know that. I also was in a Christian school and was brought up around religion, and I think just in general anyway within the Western culture that women having children felt prescribed, not, it wasn't a choice. It felt like that's what came with being a woman. And I wish that people would educate young children to say what a woman is. And a woman is not a mother. Motherhood does not equal womanhood. There is so much more to do with a woman that is nothing to do with being a mother. So you can come up with your own definition of what a woman is and you could debate it for years and years. But I wish that people would say that maybe you can't have children instead of let's prevent a pregnancy. Or maybe, maybe you don't have your period instead of let me teach you how to use a tampon. So I wish there was a lot more education in that aspect. And I also, when you are diagnosed with POI, and I hear this a lot from other POI warriors, that DEXA scans are rarely talked about. So DEXA scan is a bone density scan, and women who are diagnosed with POI should have a DEXA scan to basically check the density of the bones to make sure if they are healthy or not, and if they are unhealthy or osteopenia, it's hard to come back from osteoporosis, but osteopenia, you can build bone density, and people don't know that you can. With strength exercises and also with estrogen, you can build your bone density. So I never knew that. I never knew, and I know a lot of women didn't know that. And I didn't have my first DEXA scan until I was 20 years old. So that is something that I think people should know as well.
Thank you. And I'm going to try and lighten this up a bit. So my last
Yeah.
questions to all my my last questions to all my guests. So Sherry, what makes you happy and where is your happy place?
What makes me happy is spending time with friends, spending time with family. Christmas is also so happy for me. I love Christmas films. I could watch Christmas films all year round. I love getting the tree set up, love the decorations, love the songs. I'm someone who starts playing the songs early November, maybe literally straight after Halloween is over, straight on Christmas. And my happy place is, I mean, whose happy place isn't on holiday on a sunny beach? It's got to be.
I
It's
like a
got to
cold beach, but I'm a bit weird.
be.
And very last question, Sherry. I know it's funny asking this. I think you might be my youngest guest actually, but what would be your advice to your younger self?
Believe in who you are, and you're stronger than you think right now.
Wow.
That's
And,
what I'd
and
say.
do you know, while you were talking, the word that came into my head when I was talking to you was strength. You are a really, really
No,
strong woman. You are so strong. It really comes across in your speech and your words. It's yeah. I'm
thank you.
so glad. I'm so glad I've met you. I'm so glad that I'm sure we're going to meet again in 2025. And
Yes,
thank you for, you know, other people have POI, but you've turned POI round and really increased awareness for everybody. So thank you so much, and thank you for being on the podcast.
thank you.
And we had some technical difficulties,
Thank
which I'm
you.
hopefully going to wrap up together. So I hope I can
I
make it
mean,
sound good.
even
But
if even if it's just the end of it, I'm sure we'll do something soon later down the line.
thank you so much, Sheree. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.